President Ronald Reagan once said, quote, "We believe that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause for world peace." Today I'm going to speak about the role that Ronald Reagan played in stopping the spread of communism, as well as his influential role in helping to end the Cold War. Everyone should care about this because of the potential risks that were in place in the 1980s due to an escalating arms race, as well as the possible threat of a nuclear war and the effects that it could have had on the United States as well as the world. Through research, I have learned of the peaceful yet firm approach that Ronald Reagan had to dealing with the Soviet Union, which allowed him to eventually earn the respect and trust of Mikhail Gorbachev and allowed them to work together to decide the fate of the Berlin Wall. I will provide a brief biography of Ronald Reagan's life, information about one of his most influential speeches, and the effects that that speech had on world events. But first, let's talk a bit about Ronald Reagan's life prior to becoming the 40th President of the United States. Ronald Reagan was born in 1911 in a small town in Illinois. At the age of 26, in 1937, he moved to Hollywood to pursue a career in acting. He eventually appeared in 53 films and was eventually elected as president of the Screen Actors Guild. Prior to becoming President of the United States, he also served 2 terms as the Governor of California. Throughout his career, Ronald Reagan gave many speeches and made a name for himself as one of the great orators of our time. One of his most influential and famous speeches was a speech that he gave on June 12, 1987, in front of the Berlin Wall, entitled "A Call to Action." Since it was built in 1961, the Berlin Wall had come to symbolize communist oppression and divided Berlin between East and West and prevented free movement between the two. The speech was delivered in a time of escalating tensions between the East and the West, partly because of the stationing of short-range American missiles and a buildup of the American Missile Defense Program. The purpose of this speech was to persuade the Soviet Union that a more Western style of democracy might be the best hope to open the Berlin Wall. And throughout the speech, Reagan laid out a series of political initiatives to help achieve this. One example of this was during the speech, Ronald Reagan called for an end to the arms race and the possibility of, quote, not merely limiting the growth of arms, but eliminating an entire class of nuclear weapons from the face of the earth. The speech was delivered in a friendly yet firm tone, and the location selected to deliver the speech helped President Reagan to reinforce this. It would eventually take about 2 years for the call to action to play itself out. But on November 9th, 1989, with increasing public unrest in Europe, the Berlin Wall was finally opened. With the collapse of the communist governments in Eastern Europe, as well as the Soviet Union itself, the tearing down of the Berlin Wall came to symbolize the fall of communism as well as the end of the Cold War. In fact, in 1990, President Reagan, even though he was no longer president, traveled to Berlin and took a few symbolic swings at what was left of the wall at the time. The purpose of my speech was to inform you about Ronald Reagan's role in stabilizing Europe and helping to spread peace throughout the world. I provided you with a brief biography of his life, information about one of his most influential speeches, and the effects that that speech had on helping to stabilize Europe. A recent Gallup poll listed President Reagan as the best president in U.S. history, and it was his stern yet calming voice in the face of evil that helped him to solidify his place in history.